got some good stuff for you today. We ended here. We're going to start with Sargon. Okay. The Mesopotamia and all of this is really interesting. I love this stuff. This was part of what I got my bachelor's in. It's really, really cool to see all of their different empires and stuff like that. When we think of the Middle East, we often think of just like a big desert. And for sure, Syrian desert right there, right? However, and I'll put pictures of this, this area here is actually can be very, very fertile, very, very lush. Lots of plants, lots of grass, and easy to travel, really good land. There's a reason why so many of these people are fighting over this land, right? If this was just a giant desert, which we often think of it as, Afghanistan, Iran, Persia, and well, they're more of Afghanistan and Iran over here, but all of these Middle Eastern countries and stuff like that, we usually think of them as dry deserts. It's not true, not entirely. You know, there is big desert there, but a lot of it is actually really beautiful land. Egypt, of course, has a lot of desert, but also has super fertile land. Anyway, I'll show pictures of that. I just want to make sure that we're not only thinking of the Middle East as a desert, because it's not true. Movies and media usually only show that part of it. Okay, Sargon the Great, awesome. Kind of interesting how he talks about how his mother, who was a priestess and was not supposed to have children, abandoned him as a baby by putting him in a reed basket and floating him down a river. Now, some of you might think, oh, hey, that sounds like a biblical story in the Bible about Moses. There is, some people think the story, like, if you don't believe in the Bible, maybe you think that the story of Moses was modeled after this story. Other people have theorized that perhaps that's just a thing people did when they are not able to keep their child for one reason or another. They would pray and hope that their child found a good place, and they would send him down the river, similar to leaving a child on the doorstep of an orphanage. It's a real sad fact of our world in which many times women feel like they're not allowed to or not able to take care of a child, and so instead abandon them. So that is something that has happened throughout history. However, so that's interesting. So it's unclear whether or not one story was modeled after another, or if maybe that was just a thing that happened multiple times. Sargon gained power, lots of internal wars, lots of things. However, I think it's interesting, he comes from humble origins, right? He's a humble gardener, but he eventually overthrows the king and becomes the leader of the land. I also want to talk about the empire. So an empire is a lot of disparate, different groups of people all in one sort of group. So a kingdom is like all the same people under a ruler. And then an empire is all these different people. So maybe I'll ask, is America, is it a kingdom or is it an empire? That's a trick, it's a republic. However, empire and expansion, the Akkadian Empire lasted 150 years, okay? Sargon ruled for 56 of them. Now, keep in mind, America is just coming up to and getting closer to 250 years. This is all still really new. America is not that much older than these guys here. You're going to hear about some civilizations in here that have lasted for thousands of years. And so we think about how America seems like it's not going anywhere. A lot of these people who lived in these worlds as well also thought their country wasn't going anywhere. So change can happen. Paid tribute, famine's a big deal. And if you are relying on your food to be grown out of the ground, and you don't have a lot of sophisticated technology to make sure that it grows well each time. We're dealing with a lot of this stuff in our world now, but we have a lot of technology to balance it out. And we have the ability to import food from anywhere in the world. So if somewhere is having a famine, we have the ability to bring food from a place that's doing extra well. In the old ancient world, that was not something you could do. If you did not have enough food, you starved. And so a lot of empires are going to fall or have issues because if you're hungry, you're going to do whatever you can to get food. Hammurabi's Code of Laws. This is super important. This right here is a super famous image. You'll see this if you look into history at all. This is the first codified set of laws that we've found, and it is super important to know about. And even our laws here in America are to some extent based from here. It all comes from the same place. One of the things, talks about judges even assume the defendant's innocent. So when you're brought in accused of a crime, they assume you're innocent, and then they have to prove that you're guilty. You don't have to. In some cultures, you have to prove you're innocent, and they assume you're guilty. So whether or not the onus is on you to prove that you are innocent versus whether or not it's on the state to prove you're guilty. So that's two different things. In America, the burden of proof is on the state. The state has to prove that you're guilty. And that's exactly like what they had here, which is cool. Something here, it talks about the code of laws is often applied based on a person's social class. For example, landowners could be fined more heavily than slaves. That would be like if you were a millionaire and you're driving down in your Maserati or your super fast Tesla or whatever car you've got, Lamborghini, and you speed and you get pulled over and you get a $300 ticket. Well, if you're driving a Lamborghini, $300 is nothing. You don't care. You're just going to keep speeding. If you are poor and you're working 9 to 5 minimum wage and you've got old beat up 1998 Toyota Corolla and you get pulled over for speeding and you get a $200 ticket, $300 ticket, that's huge. That's massive. That's a big penalty, right? How are you going to pay it? Now, if you were fined more money based on how much you have, like if you were that Lamborghini person and you were fined a lot of money because you have a lot of money, it would hurt a lot and then you would decide maybe not to speed, right? That's what this sort of thing is. That's just an example where they tried to make it more expensive for people who had the money, so that way they wouldn't just do the crimes. Assyrian and Chaldeans. So the Assyrian Empire, it only has a small little blurb about it. The only thing I want to talk about the Assyrian Empire is this dude Tiglath-Pileser III. Now they don't mention him in here, which I think is a shame. Tiglath-Pileser is my absolute favorite Assyrian dude. Let's shrink this here. So these are some pictures of him. There's a bunch of pictures of him too, like grabbing lions' tails, and I just love this. Tiglath-Pileser the second. That means there was a dude before named Tiglath-Pileser. This is my absolute favorite cat name. I want a cat. I want like an orange tabby, and I want to name it Tiglath-Pileser. Mr. Tiggs, Mr. Pleaser, Tiggy. You know, there's just so many good nicknames. Anyway, so this Assyrian king, also like naming a cat after an Assyrian king, that's like chef's kiss. Okay, getting back to the work. The Chaldeans take over. Assyrians were jerks. Don't live under the Assyrians. The Hammurabi and the Akkadian Empire is not too bad. They're pretty good. I also want to point out real quick, most of these empires, most of these men that we're talking about here, these are dark-skinned. Maybe somebody would say black. Maybe it's just like dark-skinned Arab sort of skin color. Just so you have that picture in your mind. We talk about Nebuchadnezzar the Second, Chaldean king, pretty good. He is the one, he's mentioned in the Bible, if you are really into that. It talks about the Tower of Babel. We believe it was about a 7-story multicolored ziggurat. So this is this is what we believe the Bible story was based off of. Now, of course, maybe you believe the Bible story and not what archaeologists have unearthed, because, archaeology, they're still just trying to figure it out. They're trying to put together what they can. So they believe they've found what was the Tower of Babel. But, they're trying to figure it out. Whether or not you believe that or not is up to you. What we do have is we believe that it was multicolored, massive, something maybe looking like this, or this is the Hanging Gardens, I guess. Ziggurat, of course, it's a mountain. In a generally flat area, they believe that gods lived in the sky, and so they would that's not how you spell it. There we go. They believe that gods lived in the sky, and so they would build mountains to try to get closer to the gods. So these are some of these like ziggurats that you might see. This is, I guess, a pretty classic example. But any of them, they're essentially terraced mountains, or like basically a pyramid. The pyramids were ziggurats, okay? And they were a way of trying to be very faithful, sort of God-fearing things. Nebuchadnezzar II. Phoenicians, these guys are boss, okay? We owe a lot to these guys, not only with sailing, but also our alphabet. These letters right here were developed from the Phoenicians. And, I mean, they adapted it from the cuneiform, but what they did with it and how they utilized it is very, very interesting. And they changed it pretty drastically so that each symbol had a sound, like P, 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 P. That sort of thing they did. Before, it was a lot of, cuneiform is a lot more almost hieroglyphics, where it was a symbol. I want to point out with the shipbuilding here, I think this is so cool. You would think it would be stupid to take a boat, right? You want it to float on the water, so you want it to be light enough to float on the water, right? So you would think it would be completely stupid to just throw a bunch of rocks in it. Except that's exactly what they did. It's called having ballast. They keep all of these stones, this heavy, heavy weight, at the bottom of the boat. And that sinks it down a little bit. But what it does is it keeps the boat from rolling over. By having that solid base, it keeps the boat from just turning or flipping. It's really interesting, and it would be really cool to do a project with that. So I might end up doing something with that, because shipbuilding and this kind of stuff is really fun, and seeing how these guys do stuff. All right, figureheads, really cool. Trading people. These guys went so far on these crappy little boats. Like, these boats are really simple, sort of made, and these guys went all the way to from Mesopotamia, like you can see a little map here, all the way from here, even up to England. They went through the straits there. Some of them even potentially went all the way around Africa. And most of our maps that we look at are Mercator maps, which show Africa as being relatively small. Africa is absolutely massively larger than America, like massively larger than all of North America, Canada included. Africa is truly a massive continent. I'll probably make a deal about that in class at some point. But they sailed all the way around that in these kind of little boats. It's amazing, like truly momentous. I mean, if you guys have seen Moana, you've seen there's a lot of people who have done some really awesome seafaring things, and the Phoenicians were definitely one of them. Persia, if I am living in an ancient civilization, 100% I am choosing Persia. If you're going to live under an empire of any kind, you want it to be Persia. Persia was the kindest empire that maybe has even ever existed. I don't know. Probably America and modern times are better. But they really let people be, just do their own thing. They mostly just they even specifically would make sure, and they talk about it here, that regular taxation fixed each province tributes at only half of what people could afford to pay. So he's like, okay, you guys make $100 a month extra. Well, just pay me $50 and you keep 50. That way, and this is extra. This is after. So he still allowed people to make money and to become wealthy. And I think that is really important. Okay, you don't want to tax people so much that they can't build their own wealth. Otherwise, they're going to get upset and they're going to overthrow you. So these guys were really, really interesting. They built a lot of projects. In ancient times, the only way that something big got built was because part of an empire wanted it built. Part of a kingdom wanted it built. There's no rich individual citizens. It was only an empire that was rich. And so they would work to make sure that roads were built and all of these like powerful, awesome things were done. All right, so that is really all that you needed to do. We're going to talk about the legend or the legacy of Mesopotamia next week. So yeah, that is where we'll leave it off today. Just make sure you answer the questions, okay? And yeah. All right. Well, guys, have a good one.